Thanks for joining us today to discuss life and godliness with Rick and Angela Carter. If you'd like to be part of the conversation, email us at cartersforhope@gmail.com. That's Carters, the number 4, hope@gmail.com. Any questions you have, we'll discuss in future episodes. Right now, sit back and let's join in on the conversation. Alrighty. Well, we are here today in this fine set that we have produced for your visual entertainment.
Yes.
And if you're only listening, entertainment. We are near a Navy base.
Yes.
And I don't know if you'll be able to hear it or not. Probably can, but there is a all of a sudden
Jet.
and it didn't start till we hit record. So anyway, just flew over. But we're going to talk today about missions trips, and we love mission trips.
Yes.
Not because of the travel side of it, but just because of the ministry side. We love the ministry side of missions trips, and then the travel side, getting to see new places and do new things is an extra
bonus.
benefit.
Yeah.
We enjoy being on mission trips and doing outreach. And so that started for us really back in 2009 was when we took our first missions trip, and it was over to England. We had never flown internationally before. It was a real experience for us, just going to the mission field and getting to see the work of our missionaries at the time, the Gospires. They were the only foreign missionaries out of our church, and it was our first time to go see them, and it was a blessing. It was a real blessing. We really enjoyed getting to spend time with them, getting to see their work, getting to understand what they were doing, not just doing ministry-wise, but dealing with the different culture and so forth that they were dealing with, and the different challenges that they had. And it helped us understand how to pray for our missionaries in a totally different manner, but praying for them in ways we had never even considered praying for them, regarding things like exchange rates,
Huge.
the challenges that they have as far as the culture, but also the governments and the differences in laws, the differences in what you can and cannot do, and those type of things. Everywhere's not like here. And I think it's good for American Christians, and particularly American pastors, to travel to the mission field, to get a glimpse, get a view of what it's like for your missionaries. And there's a couple other reasons. There's some things I think that are very important regarding that. But let's start with just the idea as a pastor of going on a missions trip, some things that you need to be mindful of when you're going to take a missions trip, planning a missions trip. I always recommend, if you're going to take your church group on a missions trip, go first yourself.
Yes.
You need to be able to know what to tell people.
So you know what to expect. Yeah.
Yeah, and your wife being with you for that trip is an important part of that, because she's going to see things you don't. She's going to experience things you don't. If you're going to take ladies with you, she needs to have been there, so she knows, the type of plugins you need. What you can take.
Huge.
Don't take curling irons. Don't take this. Don't take that, because they won't work. Different 220 versus 110 and all that type of stuff.
Even with the so-called plug-in adapters, it'll fry.
They're not a converter.
It'll fry your curling irons or flat irons.
Yeah. So
or blow dryers.
Either way, all of the above, which is not an issue for men. But and most of your cell phone, your computer cord will have a converter where it usually will take up to 220.
Yeah.
You can charge it up to 220. So that's not an issue, but your small appliances that ladies would use is an issue. But having that experience of seeing everything. So we went over in 2009 for the first time, and we said, we're going to bring a group from our church over. There were a number of reasons, but we decided to bring this group over. Well, we needed to bring as many people as we could for various reasons, but we didn't understand the logistics side of it. And so we overtook people. Not that we shouldn't have taken as many. It worked out exactly how we had hoped it would work out, but it made things a lot more complicated. Yeah. So you need to know where you're going, because where we were going was down in southern England. You're away from the public transport, and the challenges of logistics were significantly higher, right? Yes. So we had to rent vans. Well, we didn't rent vans, actually. We rented one van, I think, and we borrowed a van, but then you have to have multiple drivers and so forth. And people weren't comfortable always driving. Now, this is why I say you need to go, if you're the pastor, you need to go and you need to experience driving there. There are some places it's best for you not to drive, but England is okay. It's not, I know it's like, oh, you're on the wrong side of the road and all this type of stuff. All you have to remember is the cars coming at you should be on your side of the car. That's how I think about it. If they're on my side of the car, everything's fine. And, it's when you let them get on the other side of the car, or even in the States, right? Then you're on the wrong lane. So it's not too complicated. So that after the first time I started driving, and that helped a lot of stuff. But so then you could take 2 vans, but it's more complicated. The more people you have, the more difficult things are, because you're talking about not only transportation, but you're out and about doing ministry, and or you go for a little tour of something, and you're talking about bathrooms, meals.
Yes.
Everything takes so much longer.
In Europe, there's not as many public bathrooms. And so, if you take, 10 people on a trip and there's one bathroom, and that it turns into an hour-long
event. It takes time. Yeah, especially when you add in your missionaries and their family and so forth. So there's complications with that. We got through them, praise God.
We did.
If you're in a city, like when we go to mission trips, for instance, like in Prague, not as big a deal. Your
amazing.
Public transport in town is phenomenal. You can take a large group and it really not be a problem.
Right.
If you were only going to be in a large city. But if you're going outside of the city for ministry purposes, it does get more complicated.
And then also, I think probably another aspect when we first started going on missions trips back in 2009, that was pre-Airbnb, VRBO. So trying to find hotels, or we ended up actually with our group, we ended up renting out a small.
It was a Airbnb. Well,
it was a hotel-ish.
Small, very, very small
breakfast
hotel, but it had like 8 rooms.
Yeah, so we ended up
8 hotel-style rooms, maybe.
Yeah.
A kitchen. We were able to use the kitchen.
Now with Airbnb and VRBO, it's a lot easier.
It is a lot easier than it was back then.
So, don't just think hotel rooms. Think, Airbnb or VRBO, because a lot of times you can get a bigger place with more rooms. So
I would really depend on the missionary to determine the size of the group.
Yeah.
And because not only is it transportation, but it is also what is the missionary comfortable with. You're going there to minister to them and minister with them. That's the point of a missions trip. It's not just a tourism trip. And we'll talk about, I think it's an important part to give the people that go on the trip also an opportunity to experience the culture a little bit. So there's that side of it, and there's different reasons to do things at different times. Your first and foremost issue is ministering to the missionary and to the church that they're starting. So asking them what would be most conducive to accomplishing, how many people do we need to accomplish what you want us to accomplish, and how many people do we need to limit to, so that we're not overburdening you and or the plan. Too many people can be as detrimental as not enough people. Right. So we had a ton of people. We did accomplish a lot, and that was a blessing, but it definitely was complicated. So the travel side of it, we originally thought, let's all book together. That doesn't work as well in our experience.
Yes and no. It's good that you're all on the same flight, because then you don't have to make multiple trips back to the airport.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying no, don't be on the same flight. I'm saying if you try and book everyone's ticket on the same deal,
on the same card or whatever.
Well, even on the same reservation, it makes it more complicated.
Yes.
And sometimes when you're going into a country, if you have a group like that, you walk in and they're saying, well, why are you all here? You say, oh, we're on a missions trip. There have been groups that have just been sent back to the States.
Yeah. So you have to know your country you're going to, if they allow that or not.
Yeah, we haven't had a group sent back to the States. But part of that is we all book our own tickets. I'll book the first. I'll find the best flights. I'll give the recommendation. Here's the flight recommendations.
Yes.
And so that everyone tries to book the same ticket. If someone ends up booking something different, we may have to make accommodations to get them, but I'm not going to hold the whole group. And I tell them, and our people, I'm not holding the whole group up because you decided to do something different and didn't try and do what we're all doing.
So what we found works best is when we find the flight, we'll do it usually after a service, evening service usually, and we'll just have everybody that's planning on going come to the office, and we just
start booking flights.
Booking them right there. Yes,
yeah.
Book them, because especially if they've never been on one before, they've never booked a flight like that, they have questions and all that kind of stuff that they're going to have. Yeah. before you even get to booking the flights, the very first thing you have to have is a passport.
Well, I was going to say that next.
Yeah.
Your group, once you determine how many people can go and how you're going to get there, how you're going to do transportation with the group, the next thing is the preparation of the people. No one is allowed to agree to go to a mission trip that hasn't already prepared themselves. So we pre-told our church, have your
I'm shedding.
You're shedding. So have your preparations. If you want to go on a mission trip, be prepared to go on a mission trip. Get your passports now. Don't wait until you decide at the last minute. Well, we decided we want to go and
A month out.
You know, you're not.
You
no,
won't go.
Right now, and this will change, but right now 6 weeks is the passport time frame, which is not that bad. And you go. It's not complicated.
But we've
you
had
do
it
it
take
online.
as long
Most
as
of it's
12
online now.
weeks.
Well, back in
Yeah.
20 time frames and all that. But yeah, most of it's online now, and or you go to a post office. You know, a lot of post offices will have the applications and various things like that. It's not difficult. I would just give yourself plenty of time and tell your people, if you anticipate you want to go on a mission trip in the future, get your passport. So
I would say make the investment in a passport anyways, just because you never know when you might want to travel.
True. So we keep our the thought here, you know, talk to the missionary, find out what it is they want to accomplish on the trip. How many people do we need to, and then promote it in the church. This is how many can go. And it's the first people with a passport that sign up that can go. And that's just kind of but at the same time, be
Keep some
mindful
people
of
in
that.
reserve.
Be mindful that there's always that, you know, if you can take 8 people on a trip comfortably, okay, that would be a comfortable number, one vehicle, that would include you and whoever's going with you, right? Then that limits how many kids can come.
Right.
Okay. So the number of kids that can come, it's not like you could go, hey, we're taking a mission trip, this is our goal, and one family that has 5 kids is like, we're all going, we can only take 8 people. So remember that this is, if you want to just go do some sightseeing and tour, go do that on your own and do that at a different time. But when we go to the mission field, we are going for the purpose of missions first and foremost, and that's our primary focus, right? So we want to make sure that we keep that thought. I'm not against kids going. I'm not against families going, as long as there's sufficient space, knowing that kids aren't necessarily always going to be the most advantageous when you're talking about certain types of ministry, right? And so we're going to help the missionary, not just give everyone an opportunity for vacation.
Right.
So what is our goal? Planning, strategizing, transportation, and so forth. Then as part of that, we're also got to make preparations for materials. And so if we're going to go, are we doing a special outreach? Are we doing a special distribution? Our goal in missions trips was that the missionary was not out of pocket and or expense for us to come minister. We want to provide for our ministry. So in other words, don't assume the missionary
is going to pay for
everything. As a church, when we took on the responsibility of doing a missions trip, we also wanted to take on the responsibility of the finances of that trip. That's part of it. So if I say to the missionary, okay, what do you want? What do you need done? Well, we need a children's ministry, evangelistic outreach for kids, or we want to do a canvassing in a new area. We want to do a outreach of a, particular type of outreach. For us, we've done a lot of like evangelistic outreach with Emotional Pain Conference or something like that. Well, what's the cost going to be? Right. So some of the cost individually is borne by the people that are going, but some of the cost is going to be necessary to raise funds through the church and or churches banding together to cover the cost. That's fine. If it's a large cost, a large venue type situation, but just factor that in. Don't just think that, well, the missionary is going to take care of all of that. One of the things that's frustrating for us is that, and this has happened to our missionaries at times, where people contact them and say, hey, we want to come over and see you and see your ministry. And then they show up and they expect our missionary to pay for their hotel and pay for all their food and pay for their transportation in the country and all that. It's like the missionary didn't raise funds to pay for your vacation.
Can I just say that's just rude?
It's rude. It's
you
really
wouldn't want
rude.
somebody to come see you and you do the same.
Yeah.
So it's just rude. Don't do that.
It'd be different if the missionary invited you and said, hey, look, we're going to put you up. We're going to take care. But don't assume on people. It's rude everywhere. And especially for a missionary.
Yeah, because like you said, they don't, most of the time, their support that they raised barely covers their everyday living costs.
Not every missionary is financially strapped 24/7, but a lot of missionaries are. And part of the reason is because no matter how much they raised, the exchange rate changes constantly. And so there's times when they raised enough for normal, right? Or at that time. Well, think about a missionary that's been on the mission field for 10 years. Inflation has dramatically changed in 10 years. Exchange rates change all the time. Just, all of that stuff.
Their cost of living goes up just as much as our cost
Absolutely,
of living.
but their support doesn't always just go up to match that.
Right.
And so, anyway, so there's a lot of factors. I'm just saying, be mindful to not be a burden, financial burden on the missionary when you're going to a mission field. So plan ahead for
and that's
for
like one of those things, like why we suggest that the pastor go over early, because when you're taking a group, like you said, you've got to think about the travel, you've got to think about where you're going to eat, what's the cost of a meal. So like our very first missions trip that we took the church on, we had figured out kind of what places we were going to eat at when we went and what the average cost of that meal was. So then when we came back, we said, okay, this is how much you're plan this much for tickets, plan this much per meal. We'll eat 2 meals out a day. We had because we rented where we did, we had the ability to make 1 meal in a day. So they only had to pay for eating out twice. And then we said, if you want drinks, if you want snacks, if you want souvenirs, you have to plan extra. So we were able to give them a general ballpark figure. Like, I think we said like 12 euros a meal, I think is what it was, eating out per person. So, that's 24 euros a day eating out.
And it was pounds at the time. The thing is that we did try and keep it below that.
We tried.
We that was like, but maybe you have 1 meal that's over, 1 meal that's under. We tried to keep it below that overall consistently, but try not to. If you give them the lowest possible number, then you're in trouble.
Right. So, and then we were there for 10 days, so that you have to factor that in too. So
10 days is a good length of time for a missions trip, actually.
Yeah.
So okay, so we've got our travel idea, and we've got an idea of how much it's going to cost to stay, to transport, to eat our meals and so forth. And we know what we're trying to accomplish while we're there. Maybe it's a conference, maybe it's a special day, maybe it's just distribution or a children's thing or a work project, right? Maybe it's a work project, whatever the case might be. So you get all of that kind of lined up and you get your stuff booked. What are other things that you need to consider? One, we've never gone to the mission field, but when we don't ask the missionary, what would you like us to bring personally? Because there's things they can't get on the mission field that they like their kids. Maybe I remember early on, we took a lot of Kool-Aid to the mission fields. We took peanut butter, ranch dressing, Italian packets of dressing, beef jerky,
4th of July decorations, Americana decorations,
that type of stuff. We've taken chips like Doritos, just things,
Cheetos,
things that they couldn't get there. That our kids really love Oreos, stuff like that. Tastes of home that you might not have had for a long time, and just personal stuff. We've had people send us stuff, maybe order stuff that they wanted and delivered to us, and we took that. By the way, if you're going to order stuff for someone on the mission field, make sure that the person receiving it knows exactly what it is, so they know when it comes, that it wasn't just randomly sent to them for no apparent reason. So
put
that's
their name on it. Make sure their name is on it, in care of.
Or tell them this is what it is. So we had an iPhone sent to us one time, and I'm like, why did someone send us an iPhone? We were getting ready to go on a mission trip. It was by name. We called Apple. They're like, yes, someone sent it to you.
It's in your name.
But we're not allowed to tell you. We're thinking it must have been like someone being a blessing to us.
Or a gift, or we don't know.
I even told the church, I don't know why somebody sent me an iPhone. You don't know if God's going to bless you some way. You don't know. And then like the night before we leave, someone messages, did you get the thing I sent you? And I'm like, no.
What'd you say?
No, what are you talking about? And then it dawns on me. I said, was it an iPhone? They said, yeah. Oh man, I'm glad that they sent it. Angela had even said before that you
Well,
should get that
maybe we should set
iPhone
it up.
activated so that you can take it on the trip. I'm like, no, I'll just do it when we get back because it was right before the trip. So I'm so glad I didn't do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so then I went over and we gave it to the church planner, and I told the church when we got back, I said, God put it on my heart to give that iPhone to a church planner, you know. So anyway, but no, I told them the truth.
But make sure
they know what's coming and all that.
That they're expecting it.
Right. So, okay, so ask the missionary, what can we do to be a blessing? Remember, the goal of the missions trip is to be a blessing to the missionary. If you're not going to be a blessing to the missionary, don't go. If your heart is not to minister with them, serve with them, help them, encourage them, help them accomplish a task, then don't go. Go on vacation. Don't go on a missions trip. Your heart needs to be right when you go. And then you got to prepare physically.
Yes.
We pastored in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Oklahoma's flat. If you exercise every day,
it's
place, still flat.
Everything is like far apart. You have to drive.
Right. So you don't do you walk on purpose in Oklahoma. It's not the natural thing you do.
Right.
In the sense of like some places in a city, maybe you do a lot of walking and you're doing a lot of stairs and all this. That's not Oklahoma. And so when we went for our first missions trip, we told everybody, make sure and walk and do this and this and this. Well, you've got to understand the terrain. You've got to understand the place you're going. And what we were doing on that particular trip was letterboxing. We were canvassing communities in the area around the town, and we were hitting all these little towns. The terrain,
it's not flat,
was nothing like, you couldn't have prepared. If you walked 2 miles a day in Oklahoma City preparing, you were not prepared.
No.
It was, there were times when you're walking, each house had 20 steps up to the door, 20 steps back down, and then you're walking uphill to the next house, 20 steps up, 20 steps down.
Yeah, you're walking uphill and then upstairs and then back down and uphill.
And you say, well, why didn't you just walk downhill? There was no downhill.
Everything was uphill.
I don't know. It was so weird.
It matter how
even if you walked downhill, it was like 10 steps to the next 20 10 steps downhill to the next 20 steps up.
It was crazy. So we recommend doing like the stair steppers, like go into a gym doing the stair steppers.
Steps are your friend.
You need to build
that
muscles.
type of terrain muscle. So you need to do steps, not just walk on a flat area. But because of that, also we planned for our trip, we planned morning outreaches, afternoon, tourism.
In Southern England, we could do that.
Yeah. Well,
not every place you can.
It depends on the place, depends on the style of what you're doing. But there, morning outreaches, and you say, well, why weren't you there just doing outreach 24/7? Because
you're
physically you couldn't.
Afternoon.
Yeah, you just physically couldn't. You could not prepare enough, to be honest. And if you're taking normal people, they're just not not going to be able to do it. So we would do a morning outreach, 3 to 4 hours of by the time
hard, intensive,
and we'd have stop for lunch, and you'd be exhausted, and so now we're gonna go and we're gonna see something and enjoy that, and then we would have fellowship in the evening. Then with the missionaries, a meal. We would fix a meal or take them out and just fellowship and encourage them.
Yeah.
Fellowship and encouragement of your missionary while you're there is as much a part of the missions trip as the actual labor. You're there to you want them, when you leave, you want them to be blessed. You want them to be glad that you came, to feel refreshed and so forth.
If they have kids, play games with their kids.
Absolutely. Do things with their kids specifically. Yeah. Be a blessing to their family and not just the man, be a blessing to the family. So, we would do that mornings. We would do a little bit of sightseeing in the afternoons, not over stuff. We weren't running hard. We went and did something easy, something nearby, and just experience the culture a little bit, maybe go to a little shopping area, let the people do a little shopping area and then spend time fellowshipping and, keep the focus spiritual, but also enjoy the time, together.
Sure.
It's a good way to approach that. Different areas, we've done different types of things. We've done like in Cornwall, it it was just a distribution, and we had a service that Sunday, but it wasn't a a campaign type thing for a
No,
special
we
day.
participated in a parade one year. and
We did participate in a parade, just passed out tracts as we went, and we won best
float.
float
Yeah.
for that parade. So and there was even a little trophy that the church got to keep for that year. But when we were in Prague, the outreach there was very different because you're not going letterboxing. You actually would go to.
It was less strenuous.
It was very much less strenuous, and there's public transport. It's not got a lot of hills and all in Prague, right?
Right.
Just kind of like that in most cities. Even London is fairly flat. There's not a ton of hills in London, just like Oklahoma City. That's the reason, But in Prague, you would go to the subway tube, the tubes, the in and off on the tubes, station someone at each entrance and or exit, and
you just
hand out flyers. We were doing a campaign there for Emotional Pain Conference. So that was at the end of our time. We would just distribute as much as we could, and then we would conference. There, you could distribute all day, really, if you wanted to, but they're not very busy.
Yeah, you want to do it in the morning, and you want to do it in the evening.
And even rush hour times is where you're trying to hit. And then, hitting, even though we had certain ones that we were at every time, but then we would send groups to others around the area and, hit the morning, hit the afternoon, hit the, different ways like that. And you say, well, isn't it the same people? It's maybe some of the same people, but if they've already taken something, they just walk on by. But you've got others that maybe didn't take it the first time or the third time or whatever. So it's works out well that way. And so we were able to take older folks to that one than we were to the.
You still do a lot of walking, but it's not going upstairs all the time.
Right. But we did promote it that way. Like, hey, if you're a senior and you've wanted to go on a missions trip, this is the one to go on. Because you're not going to have the strenuous hills and all that type of stuff. So you just kind of be mindful of that type of a situation. But that both of those were excellent. I mean, we haven't had a bad mission trip. We've had crazy mission trips. We haven't had a bad mission trip. So I'm going to tell you a story before we get done of our first mission trip, the chaos of our first mission trip. But so anyway, we just got to be mindful. Okay, what are we going for? And planning, strategizing. Now, when you're going to travel, if you're going to do some sightseeing or you're going to do outreach ministry, the person that's in charge of the group, whether it's the missionary taking the group or if it's you as the pastor or whatever, needs to know where bathrooms are, where emergency stuff is, how to deal with certain, if something happens, how to deal with it. Because the truth is that you can spend a lot of wasted time looking for a bathroom. And you need to kind of have a mindset of, okay, I know we're going to need a restroom. Where's the easiest place with the most stalls? You can really kill your whole momentum if you're like, okay, we need a bathroom. Well, let's just stop it up this place. Yeah, they've got one toilet and that's for everybody. And you've got 15 people and everybody needs to go to the
bathroom. Even if it took 5 minutes per person, which is not very long.
Yeah,
actually.
3 minutes would be.
Yeah, but that's a whole hour.
You got 15 people, 3 minutes per person is 45 minutes out of your day, and everyone else is just sitting there dead time.
Waiting.
So knowing where bathrooms are is, I can't overemphasize how important that is. And it seems like something so small.
Especially in Europe. Yeah. Especially in Europe.
Right. All right. Then another thing that is important to know is if there's a custom that we have as Americans or particular words that we have as Americans that are offensive, you need to know that.
Right.
And you need to tell your people, hey, don't do this, don't do that. If you see this, maybe they do things that mean nothing to us, but they're offensive to them. Tell your people. Be mindful of those things, right? Tell your people, because if someone does something offensive towards your group and you've got someone that's being a prankster or something like that, and they don't know what it means, they may actually reciprocate thinking it's funny. And in fact, they're actually being offensive.
Right. Well, and you could wind up into some serious situations. For instance, like the one time we were in Prague with Brother Gossmeyer, we were waiting at a train stop, and somebody.
No, that wasn't Prague. That was Amsterdam.
Oh, Amsterdam. That's right. And we were waiting at a train stop, and some guy come up and asked Brother Gossmeyer,
"Are you for Charlie?"
and which sounds innocent to
They're
us.
like, we don't know Charlie.
We don't
No,
know.
are you for Charlie? I don't know what you're talking about. We don't know Charlie. And finally, the guy walked off, and a person behind us said he was asking if you wanted cocaine.
So if he would have
It's like,
said, you
what?
know, oh yeah,
Like,
yeah, sure, you
sure,
know, what's
yeah.
blowing him off, he could have been into some
You know,
serious trouble.
yeah, you just got to
you know,
you got to be
you
careful
have
and
to,
stuff like
you
that.
just have to be aware of those things. Don't agree to things that you don't know. That you and even though Charlie sounded like a normal name, you know,
And you might think hand symbols are the same worldwide. They are
they're
not.
not. Yeah,
So just
be cautious.
just don't reciprocate things you don't know what they mean.
Yeah.
So be cautious about that. Okay. Well, I'm sorry, I lost track now that you threw that story in
I'm
there.
sorry, you were talking about hand gestures and words.
Prep your group for things like that was the point of that, and make sure that your folks are encouraging. Honestly, I would say this is one of those things where if you've got someone they're always a complainer, you need to have a discussion with them in advance about when we're here. If you have a complaint, you bring it to me. You don't go to the missionary and start complaining to the missionary.
Yeah.
We're here to be a blessing. We're not here to, tell them everything that we think is wrong with their country that they're in there ministering to, or everything we don't like about this and that. It doesn't matter.
That country is not American.
They're
don't
not
think like
America, and that
Americans.
missionary doesn't need to carry your burden of complaint.
Yeah.
Just, prepping your people, and I just told all of our people that, but, if we had someone that just I knew tend to point out everything they don't like, generally, I would just spend some time with them personally and say, do not be you.
By the way, if you stay in hotels, well, and even in Airbnbs and things, it's not going to be like what you're used to here. So you're not going to have some of the same comforts. You're not going to have some of the same amenities. So be careful and not complain about that.
Okay. And when you're traveling in other countries, you'll go sometimes in the hotel, you'll go into the bathroom. There's the toilet. There's another thing that looks kind of like a toilet.
It's
not a sink. It's not a sink. It's not a toilet. It's not a place to put all of your personal bathroom items in a nice place. They put this
It's
nice
not a
thing.
storage unit.
It's not a storage unit. It's a bidet. It's a bidet. All right.
And look up what a bidet is.
Look
used
it up
for.
yourself. All right. We're not going into that. But anyway, we've had weird discussions on mission trips about bidets.
Yes,
all right. So anyway, not everywhere is like America. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
And so, but that being said, experience local culture. So
Give
anyway,
it a whirl. But also too, especially in Europe, you don't want to watch TV after certain hours.
I encourage our people
Don't watch
don't
it
watch
anyways,
TV at all. But
don't watch TV after certain hours because
yeah,
they don't have the same.
they don't have the same
restrictions that we do here.
morality
Yeah.
restrictions and so forth. I just told our people just stay away from the TV.
You're a new country. Don't watch TV.
So, okay, Lori, is there anything else you think of that it's like, hey, these are things that you should, consider?
No, I just think
those are the big things.
Those are the big things. I think probably one of the biggest things, the golden rule, just be flexible. Things are going to go wrong. Things are not going to go even you can do some of the best planning, some of the best research.
Yeah.
It's just life. Things are going to happen.
We always told our groups before we
Be
left, we had our preparation meetings, planning meetings, where we would tell it, okay, this is what you need to know. This is what you need to know. We usually have at least 2. And then before we go, and we always tell them our motto on mission trips, Semper Gumby. Always flexible, right?
And and we try to prepare everybody, and we try to tell them, look, we're on a missions trip. It's an adventure. Sometimes things are going to happen. It's okay. It's an adventure. Look for the good. And,
Yep.
And go on.
Always look to be a blessing. All right. So before we go, first mission trip, we take this big group. Because it was a large group, I had never driven. I should have just learned how to drive the first time. I didn't think about it.
Lessons learned.
Listen, I did drive a little the first time, but I don't know. It just mentally.
We're taking people from the church.
So there was a man in the church who was he was a good man and all that, but he was a truck driver and he volunteered to take off work to drive our group. It was very kind of him, but he also was not saved. He had just been coming for a while. He volunteered, and difference in culture, difference in thinking, not a saved individual, but the missionary was working with him and he was open. He was, responsive to things. So it wasn't like he was, just a stranger or something like that. And so anyway, he volunteers to drive. Well, we're going along pretty good for a number of days. And then
we had teenagers with us on this trip.
Yes, we had teens. And so we get to this one day where we're going to go in the afternoon, we're going to go do a activity. And so one of the activities was that you could walk across the moors to this thing called the cheese rings. It was these very large stones that were stacked, 3 of them, and you could get on top of them like as a group and walk around, and it would rotate like this because there was the way that they were balanced and stuff. It's a natural formation. It was really intriguing. All right, but so that was the thing the teens wanted to go to. Well, the older folks didn't want to walk across the moors and do a lot of walking and all that. And there was a church that was in that area that still had pre-World War II stained glass windows. And so the older people wanted to go see that. So we divide up. Literally, only one lady went with, only one adult lady.
Wanted to go with the teens.
She's a very responsible person, very good person. And so she went with the teens, and then this guy took them. And that was pretty much a full bus anyway.
Yeah.
A full van. And so they went, well, we go see with the older folks, we go see the stained glass. We have a great time. We get back to the rooms. And when we walk in, the kids are sitting there tear-streaked, teary-eyed.
The Neptune will always hold a special place in our hearts.
Yeah. And I'm like, what is wrong, everybody? And they said, you got to talk to, and I'm not going to use any names here, but you got to talk to the lady, and so she comes out of the room and she is like almost hysterical. Like, oh, Pastor, oh, and you got to see this. I videoed it. And she had a camcorder. So we're like, okay. No, it was her iPad. It was an iPad that she recorded it on. Anyway, so we go to the room there, and she turns on this video, and they're walking through the field, and she's recording, and there's this pond, and there's a cliff, and the guy that was driving said, "Come on, kids," and they all went up to the top of the cliff, and she's watching this. She goes, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you going up there?" And he goes, "We're going to, all those guys are going to dive off into this pond and swim across." And it was a pretty, I'd say 15, 20 foot, maybe something like that. It was pretty good size. And so just from the look of it.
I was with the old people.
So she loses her mind.
Oh my goodness.
She is like, if you jumped off in there, how do you even know you could survive that? I don't know. It just seems like it'd be fun. And she's going nuts on him. Like, if you jumped and died, would you go to heaven? And he's like, I don't know. I don't think so. And she's like, you're going to go to hell if you die. And you're going to jump off there and da-da-da. And she was like really, really concerned about this. Well, he strips off in front of everyone. He was wearing only a Speedo. He strips down to his Speedo. So he had planned. 50-year-old strips off, and she's down there like begging him, and she's like crying.
And mind you, all of our kids have been trailing behind him.
They're just all standing there like, So he jumps off into the water. She goes, "Come on, kids, come on." And she takes the kids, and they leave him close at the top of the cliff, him in the water, and they leave him. He is their driver. They leave him. They're headed back. She's like sick to her stomach. She's so worked up.
She gets nervous. She's throwing up. And so our kids were with them. The kids are crying. They're like, "Oh, he ruined all our fun and all this." And she has this idea because there's sheep everywhere. And she goes, "Kids, in Oklahoma, we can still have fun because in Oklahoma at the rodeos, the kids ride the sheep." And so they go, okay, so they start trying to catch a sheep to ride. I don't know where that, anyway, they end up running a sheep off of a little cliff and whatnot. And so finally they just get back to the, they get back and they just stand there at the van. Because he's in a pond with no clothes. And so finally he gets back. He is not happy. Oh, he was angry and all that. The kids are all crying.
The kids were all crying. They never got to see the cheese wheels.
Nope. Didn't make it.
Anyway, it was something else.
It was epic.
The worst individual experience we had on a mission trip.
Well, it only got better from there.
And it is hilarious.
Because...
But, let's not go into listen, we had other stuff happen on that mission trip. Cultural things that, anyway. But that particularly that was our first missions trip. And that was one of the first things that happened. I mean, a couple days into the trip. And the point of all that story was this, okay? just go with the flow.
The best planning. You can't plan for every
can't plan
scenario.
for everything. You can't plan for crazy nationals and all that type of stuff.
But you know what? All of our kids that went on that trip,
Everybody remembers.
Everybody remembers. And like our kids were on that trip, and we have 2 kids that are now missionaries. So, I think it just added to their enjoyment of missions.
At the moment, it was traumatic, but now it's so funny. And you think about all the crazy things that have happened. And, Angela said it earlier. I was going to say it here at the end. Just be flexible.
Life's an adventure.
Don't get over serious about yourself. Minister, serve, be kind, be generous, and be a help, but don't be all rigid
And
about,
have fun. Just
don't be
have
so
fun.
rigid about everything, because there's going to be times when things just are that
Don't go
way.
right.
And,
Yeah.
you got to be able to laugh at the crazy stuff that happens.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
anyway, hopefully that story didn't scare you off. In all the mission trip we've taken,
That's the
that's
worst.
the only thing
Yeah.
that happened. It happened the first time. We've never had anything like that happen since.
No.
Quite like that. We've had other things happen, but just,
That was
anyway,
pretty dramatic.
that was pretty dramatic. Everything after that was easy to
Yeah.
handle.
It was
you know?
like, sweet. Got that out of the way.
Anyway, all right. Well, I do pray that you'll take mission trips, take your church to visit your missionaries.
Do fundraising.
Yeah, we did fundraising with our people, and just go be a blessing to your mission. It'll help your church missions program. It'll help your people have a heart and a vision for missions, and it'll help your missionaries.
Yeah.
So just be engaged in missions.